Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
Jay, you just opened with one of the most sensitive thoughts that I've heard you say in a long time, because you never struck me as someone who ever got nervous, but you were telling our guest, Brooklyn, that we hadn't done a podcast in a while and maybe you were feeling nervous before this conversation.
I was, Hayes. Like show business has been, I know you guys have been working on the runarounds. You're some of the few blessed people who are still working, but a lot of us in show business have been like, kind of, hitting the corner with a little hat and a tin can trying to, beg for a living. Because there's been no work. And so, and to couple it with that, Hayes, you and I have not done our podcast in a few months. And so last night I'm like, oh boy, we're going to have Brooklyn Decker on. And then I'm like, what if we don't have anything to talk about? And then we have a whole hour. And then what if it's a bad podcast? And this morning I woke up, I'm like, oh, we got to do the podcast. And then, what if we don't have anything to talk about? And I was kind of excited by the nerves because it is true. I mean, I go up and perform stand-up. I just did your stand-up show in front of a lot of rich, older white folks who I know couldn't have been huge fans of mine. And that's also the most thrilling time to go up in front of a crowd is when you're like, these people haven't seen Super Troopers. They haven't seen Beer Fest. But anyway, I went well, and I went really well. But I think that's the exciting part of show business. And I'm now that I'm here and I've met Brooklyn, I think we're gonna have a good hour.
She's the best. I have worried about conversations previously, but not with Brooklyn, because as you mentioned, we just hung out for the last couple months in North Carolina, and there was never a dull moment, and also interesting, crazy perspectives that this woman brings to the table, from like highly intelligent takes on political things and her family history. I want to talk about that with your brother and your parents being like part of the first responder community, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, do you get nervous, Brooklyn, before shows?
Yeah,
or
all the time. Jay, it's so funny that you said this never happens for you, because I get nervous all the time. I get nervous before. I mean, this could be our podcast weekly that we do together, and I still think I'd be nervous before every taping. I always have nerves when I don't know what that is. I think it's excitement. It's not a bad thing. I think it's like energizing, but I always feel nervous. And also, Jay, I feel like I just need to, I guess, ask the question: do you really not think that a crowd full of middle-aged white people have not seen Super Troopers? Like, isn't that like the perfect demo? Because as a fan who saw it when it came out, as a middle-aged white woman, like, I feel like we're the exact demographic. That's not your room?
I'll be a little more specific. They were a little older. There were a number of older white folks. And it's nothing wrong with white folks. Like most of our fans are white. I mean, that's the reality. I go do stand-up shows and it's like 98% white. That's not the issue. The issue is when they buy a ticket to my show, they're literally buying a ticket because they've seen the movies largely. But in this case, it's a charity show, and so it's rich people who could give money. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
They haven't necessarily seen any of my films.
That's fair.
They're going to watch Hayes. They're going to watch Brett Morin, the other comic, and so you got to have like a set of jokes that's a little more general.
That's fair. They're there for the cause, maybe not necessarily there to see
some of them aren't even comedy
talent.
fans. Some of them are not even comedy fans.
Jay, you killed. Everyone
thanks.
loved you.
Thank you.
It was, I could see where you would think that was the audience. It was a mixed bag though of people. We had people from all over town, younger skiing people. We had people that were vacationing. We had other actors in the room for our show. And listen, man, I had not heard your stand-up in a while. You come out swinging. And when you tell the story, I don't know if you want to talk about
Go ahead. Why not? What do I care?
But when you talk about the time that you accidentally did heroin, people are, Jay comes out like, it's amazing. His whole act. If you haven't seen him do stand-up, I encourage everyone to go see it because it is no holds barred. And I knew that both you and Brent were going to do your set. Like, I never said, hey, don't say this, say that this is your crowd, because you guys are killers and professionals. And you both just, you didn't hold back. I mean, Brent, especially getting up and working the crowd before you went up. And he essentially said 10 minutes into his set, I can't get a read on you people. What's going on here? And he worked the whole room and brought everyone around.
Yeah.
So when you came up with your Burt Reynolds, Willie Nelson heroin stories, people are like, oh, I guess this is what we're doing.
I was really grateful that Brent went out first because he's got a different style. I'm not really super comfortable just talking to the audience because I'm like, I don't know what they're going to say. I really like, that's why I like writing movies, because I'm like, you'll say this, then you'll say this, then you'll say this. It'll be in this rhythm. It's going to be great. And then if you improvise, fine, that's fine. But this is at least the bare minimum. We're going to do this, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be good. I'm not like a talk to the crowd comic.
So I did Brooklyn. I did, I guess, stand up for the first time in a while at this show last
Yeah, you were
week.
getting ready for it, and when we were in Wilmington.
Yeah, I was kind of getting ready for, but the thing is, you have to have, like, when Jay and Brent go up, they have tried and true jokes that they've told before, and they know where to hit them and how to do it. I was a little nervous before that show because I was doing all new stuff, and I just liked telling stories. And the story. So Brooklyn, I didn't tell you much about our podcast, but
I
one
listened
of the
to a
things
few
we do-
episodes. I've listened. I'm a fan. I would
Okay.
call myself a fan of the show.
I love. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
love. So we
Thank
usually start with a story, and then my story today, which I'll start with briefly.
Can I interrupt you, Hayes? This
Sure.
is also a common trait of our podcast is that Hayes will start the story, but he'll be half leaning out of the frame. And so like one eye won't be in, and I'll be like, that's just not good framing. I mean, I'm a filmmaker here.
I'm
Hayes.
getting
We gotta.
killed with the sun. This is
Yeah, and there's a
director.
hat, and there's a glare, and there's a.
Well, my
It's
story
nice.
is
It's a little
actually.
flare, and it's nice.
I wanted to tell this story with Brooklyn on the show because she has first responders in her family. And my story is based on this hat that I'm wearing. So for the listeners out there, I'm wearing a Chicago police hat. And this was given to me by my oldest friend in the world, who is a Chicago police officer. And so the story, I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, and I check in with him all the time about not just like stuff that's happening in the city, but like life stuff. We talk about football. He's just like my best friend. And one of the things I was asking him about a couple weeks ago was the morale of the police department. And he's a homicide detective. So, business is good. He's busy. There's a lot happening.
Oh,
there.
Chicago. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
So I said to him
Carry on.
I just said, hey, man, why don't you guys feel like you need a rebranding? People need to feel a little pride in the police department again. I mean, sure, there's been some egregious things that have happened in law enforcement all over the country that have been highlighted. But I equated it to like going into a Whole Foods and having like, one batch of rotten bananas and then looking at the entire store and being like, we have to throw all this food out, get rid of all the food. That feels like a little bit of what's happened with the Chicago Police Department. So I said, Nick, send me up a hat. I really want to wear a hat and rep the CPD. He said, you don't want a hat. They're going to throw tomatoes at you. I said, no, I'm used to it. Just give me a hat. So I wore this hat when I was traveling in an airport. And I had the Chicago police hat on, but when you wear a hat, you forget what it says. And so like you can't see it because it's above your head. And I was in the Salt Lake City airport bar, and there was a group of people in the corner, and they were kind of looking at me, and I gave them a nod. And then one of the guys came up and he gave me a beer. I said, you don't have to buy me a beer, man. He said, no, I really appreciate your work.
Oh.
And I was, I was totally flattered. And I was thinking like, I just had a movie come out. There's a possibility that someone might have seen it and possibly liked it. And so I was flattered, and I accepted the beer, and I started talking with the guy. And then he said, I'm really honored to meet you. And I thought, wow, that's a little it's a little too much. I mean, I did make some good choices in this film and did some character stuff, but I'd be honored to meet me. And then he said, this is where my face went white. He said, how long have you been on the force? And I went, oh no, I'm not a cop. I'm a actor. And the guy goes, Jesus Christ. And he turned around.
What did you do with the beer? Did you buy him a beer? Did you pay him
I
back?
I
can't
just like
take the
kind of
beer.
meekly thanked him and was like, I'll Venmo you. Like, sorry.
So you haven't seen my work. Okay. Okay. Oh, Hayes.
Stolen
that's
valor,
brutal.
Hayes. That's stolen
Oh.
valor.
It was, no good
Ah.
deed goes unpunished. It was a good intention to have this hat. But people started thinking I was a cop. When you're sitting on an airplane with a police hat on, they're like, all right.
Like,
But
look,
then
are
you're
you the
having,
air
like, maybe,
marshal?
like- Yeah, but if you're hammering drinks, because I fly a lot, sometimes I get upgraded. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
in first class, and if I'm having like my
Getting those
fourth
free,
cocktail
free
on
drinks.
a plane, the woman's like, you must be off duty. And I'm thinking like, she thinks that I'm a cop.
She's like, you've
She's
seen
gonna
some shit.
Start pretending that I'm
Uh,
transporting a prisoner.
I'm gonna
Oh.
tell you a story that is similar, but it has this pretty tragic ending. I'll tell you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
this is
a
getting
friend
better.
of mine who I worked with on a television show, on the Jane Lynch television show, and it was, I worked on two versions of the show, and she plays an angel, and she's like a guardian angel, and so Jane Lynch is like, they did a whole bunch of episodes where Jane's the guardian angel, might be called guardian angel, and they're like, that's terrible, so they throw the whole 6 episodes out, they rewrite it. I shot one of the first ones, and I'm like, I thought it was pretty good. They're like, it's junk. So now when they rewrite it, I shoot another episode. Now it's got a whole new cast. Jane Lynch is still an angel. But I meet this actress named Ginger Gonzaga. And Ginger is like half Filipino, half white. She played a nurse on one of those medical shows. So she's down in, I think it's Costa Rica at a wedding. And she's got a, I think she's there solo, doesn't have a date, whatever. And everyone's kind of in the pool doing ecstasy. And
Exercises or
ecstasy.
ecstasy?
Nope.
And it's
Ecstasy.
nighttime,
Not
right?
exercises.
Everyone's having fun, great time, whatever. And suddenly, one of the guys in the groom's party, somebody's like, holy shit. There's one of the guys in the groom's party is in the bottom of the pool, and he's like 3-4 feet of water, whatever. And he's at the bottom, clearly. And they pull him up, and he's unconscious. And they put him on the side of the pool, and everyone's like fucking freaking out, and they're all Xing. And they look at Ginger, and they're like, you're a nurse, right? And she goes, no, I played a nurse in a television show. And they're like, well, what are we going to do? And she goes, I hopped to it. I'm like in hero mode. I kind of took a CPR class. So I'm the one who's on the side, and I'm giving this guy fucking mouth to mouth, and I'm pressing his chest, and he dies.
Oh, gosh.
And he dies.
Gee.
And he dies.
Oh,
Ay, ay, ay.
God.
I know.
I said it was going to have a bad ending.
I told you it had a
thought-
bad
It's the
ending,
worst.
and I'm
It's the
just
worst
like,
of the endings.
Wow.
Well, so let's unpack that for a second, Jay. So okay, are there charges? Because did anyone call
Yeah, what are the
the
ramifications?
authorities? I mean, like, is that involuntary anything? Because
Because
I
of
mean-
the person who sold him the drugs?
I don't. I mean, there are a few factors at play here. There's
Let-
there's
let-
the drugs. There's like administering CPR with there's like sort of. I mean, you can do that whether you've been trained.
Let me
or
just
not,
say
but
this to you, Brooklyn. It's Mexico.
It's
I thought it
Chinatown,
was Costa
kid.
Rica.
It's Chinatown, baby. It's Costa Rica, baby. It's Costa Rica.
Oh, that's wow. And how is Ginger? Like, how is Ginger doing? That's a really
You know, when she
Wow,
told me
that's
the
a-
story, she didn't tell me that it was going to have that ending. And so I'm laughing along the whole way, waiting for her to be the hero. And then she was like, and then he died.
Ooh.
And I was like,
died.
oh, I did not see that
Ooh.
one coming, Ginger.
What a
I
way to
feel
go.
like in some ways Brooklyn willed this conversation because a lot of time, yes, you are very comfortable with the dead.
Yeah.
One of our first conversations that I had with Brooklyn was
You called me a goth. You said you're more gothic than I would have expected. Is exactly what you
right.
said.
You
Yeah,
did-
you're a little goth.
right off the bat. I thought, maybe bright, sunny, optimistic, which she is that. But then she asked me right away if I was an organ donor. And
It came up naturally. I don't know how it came up, but like asking, I don't know. We started talking about day one, Hayes and Aaron said, and it was like, what are you going to do when you die? Like, what are you going to do with your body? I don't know. You're spending like 15 hours just sitting next to a person. You're like, I don't know. All right, what are you going to do when you die? You know? And I think that's what brought it up.
But you were also someone who you were really comfortable with. Didn't you have an experience with like cadavers?
With organ donating? Well, yeah. So, okay. So my parents, my dad was a respiratory therapist. He does stroke stuff now. And my mom was a critical care nurse. My brother's a firefighter. Uncles, grandfathers, firefighters, cousins, other cousins, cops. My sister-in-law. So like whenever like someone's bleeding out, they knock on our door, and my parents I'm looking at their house. It's connected to our house right now. So like it's a little compound. And like when shit goes down, they're calling us.
In North Carolina?
In North Carolina. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, even my friends now, when they have a sick kid, I get a call because there's this episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where like there's a kid who's playing a doctor's son, and as a result, he behaves like a doctor and gives diagnoses like a doctor because he grew up. I'm that person. Like I think that I can administer medical care because my family. So my sister-in-law has this great company. It's actually incredible. I'm laughing because it's just a funny concept called Experience Anatomy, where she basically she does cadaver education. So my sister-in-law Jamie, the CEO of Experience Anatomy, has like a warehouse of dead bodies. And like one of her big clients is the FDNY. Like they, because when you're training like these highly, skilled medical professional, like who are they going to train on? And they train on dead bodies. And so yeah, there's my uncle's coming in to help transport a bunch of bodies coming in from Houston, and there's a lot where it's something I'm comfortable with. Bodies and organs, and I've seen it.
Like darkness.
Wow. Well,
yeah. I mean, it's not. It's part of life. It's part of life. It's
part of life. What was this? Didn't somebody bring a bag of parts into a kitchen?
Yeah. So okay. So this is. I feel guilty sharing the story because it's not my story, but I feel like it's worth hearing. So my brother is a firefighter in Charlotte, and he and his wife were living in Virginia at the time, and she was working at a college there doing training and for healthcare professionals. And my brother, to be a firefighter, you have to be an EMT. Like you have to get your EMT training before you can join the fire academy or do the fire academy. So he was EMT. He comes home from work, and my sister-in-law is a fantastic cook, and he sees 5 like turkey pans on the dining room table, and he's super excited because he's like, "What has Jamie whipped up tonight for dinner?" And he opens one of the turkey pans, and it was a head. It was a head. Because it was a head. There were heads. So there were 5 heads on his dining room table. But the reason why is because at the time, and she was working. This was before she had her company. She was working for the school there. At the time, she was she's allowed to. So like if she gets pulled over by police officers and she has body parts in her car, it could be a problem for her, right? Like, so she has a license that says she's able to carry a certain quantity of body parts, and like they're specific. It's like a certain number of full bodies, legs, limbs, heads, that kind of thing. So she has a special license for transport, and she had stopped by their house on the way to she'd rented out like a ballroom at a hotel for plastic surgeons to practice rhinoplasty on these heads. And so she had stopped by on the way to the conference room, and the heads were on the dining room table. So my brother walked in on the heads. And this is like, it's different. It's different now with she has with her own company, she has like this big warehouse. She has a warehouse and a training facility, and it's different now. But
maybe a van.
When she was working, I have a minivan, and when they are renting And it's relevant to the conversation because when they are renting in other markets, they rent out minivans because you can put down all the seats and you can lay a lot of bodies in the back of a minivan. You transport
So wait a
them.
minute. If I donate my organs, which I am an organ donor, I will tell you, I'm going to reconsider that after these stories.
I hope not your liver, Jay.
And
Nobody wants that.
nobody wants
Organ
that.
donation is different from body donation. They're two
But I'm not going
different
to end up on
things.
your sister-in-law's counter with my head, so
No.
some surgeon could
No.
practice rhinoplasty on me. I mean,
Well, you could. The kitchen table thing won't happen because that was part of like a different school situation. But yeah, I mean, you technically could
They
because
could.
when you donate your full body, a lot of like former military will donate their bodies to don't like for like military training. So it's like you can only imagine what kind of testing they're doing on.
I'm actually okay with it. I'm okay with it.
So when your body is donated, I mean, you're advancing, hopefully you're advancing medical research, scientific research. So how you don't want a plastic surgeon to practice rhinoplasty on you for the first time,
Right.
you don't want them to be sort of learning in the OR. So they have to do this training on cadavers.
If my head ends up on your kitchen counter, Brooklyn, just do me a favor and throw a little Cubs hat on it and be like,
I got you. I'll take such great care of you. Don't worry.
I would do it if I could have restrictions. I would be a full body donor if I knew that I would end up like in a museum behind glass flexing and people be like, oh, that was a guy who lived in 2025. But
yeah.
if
Like
I'm
the
getting
bodies exhibit.
dismembered,
You'll get dismembered. You will.
You're saying you want to be in like the Natural History Museum with like,
As like a specimen
with a loincloth on.
that's
like
right.
this is peak man. This is what man in the early aughts/aughts looks like.
Man, this is a man.
This was sort of the picture of manhood.
Is what they look like.
No, that's like the bodies exhibit. I don't know if y'all have been to one of those where they fully plastinate and you can see all the like vessels and there's like you can see all the muscles in some, you see all the fascia in another, and like that. Those are I mean, you could technically be in a museum.
Brooklyn,
if you
what's
wanted to.
Can you tell me what fascia is? Because I just looked at a video on how to swing a golf club, and the guy's like, you can't use your muscles, you have to use your fascia. And what he was saying was he winds up his body so hard, and he doesn't use his muscles to come back. He uses fascia, and I'm like, what is it?
Well, your fascia is the connective tissue that connects muscle to bone. So I don't know that you can isolate the use of fascia, not muscle. I think that kind of sounds like a load. I don't think that that's
He's
possible.
a golf teacher, so he doesn't.
But like,
he doesn't know.
Plenty. Yeah. I feel like I don't think you can. Like, I don't think you can isolate your fascia. I don't know. Again, not a doctor.
I'll send you the video.
Not
you
a
tell
doctor.
me if he's
Yeah,
full
send
of
it to
shit.
me. I'll give you my advice, my medical advice. But no, I like the fascia is the connective tissue.
There's a lot of talk about exercising your facial fascia now. Do you know about that?
What, like gestures? Like
like
making-
face
facial
yoga. And
That's supposed to be like Botox.
lymph kind of
Like,
stuff. Yeah,
I've seen some videos. Yeah. I'm at that age where like I go online and that's the stuff that they start to send me,
Yeah,
They're
I'm
like
at that
how
age
to
too.
prevent your face from falling.
Yeah, I'm
with-
at that age.
And people are putting their hand. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know much
Like
about
that.
it. I have seen a few.
All that
Exact-
stuff.
yeah.
I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I kind of believe it.
I do
believe in
too.
all of it.
I do too,
Like,
but I
why
just
wouldn't
save
we?
it. I save it and I never do it.
Exactly. Then you have thousands of saved videos and but I feel like, I mean, if we're working out the rest of our body, our muscles, why would we not work out? I mean, I don't know how to do it, but
Right. I don't know how to do it either.
you're doing it right now. You're doing like
Crazy.
tongue work back there. I can see a difference. I can see it. You're lifted.
Brooklyn, I want to talk about our show and all the work you've done as an actor, but I've lost a bet to myself because I think we're like, I don't know how long we've been talking, 20 minutes, a half hour.
24 minutes and 20 seconds.
And Jay has not asked one Sports Illustrated swimsuit model question yet. So
Oh.
I lost my bet. I
What was the
almost thought
over-under?
he was going to open with it. And I'm Jay, I feel like it's a sign of maturity and restraint.
I'm
That
here to
you-
answer any and all
Now,
questions.
it's a sign of cold calculation, Hayes. Like,
When were you planning to drop one?
well, It's number 3 on my little list here.
I almost texted
Um,
him, please limit your questions about the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, Jade, to 100.
There's not enough time. Not
I
enough
have
time.
look. I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Um,
You can take a minute if you really want to be thoughtful about it.
okay. So
Yeah.
you were obviously a major Sports Illustrated model and a Victoria's Secret, and so you have this position in the world, right, where you're like, where like probably a lot of people take a run at you, right? They're like, I'm gonna hit on this. Maybe who knows, right? And so you must have this it's like having a superpower of a mating superpower, a sexual superpower, right?
Wow.
Where you can walk in anywhere and be like, that guy. And it'll be like, okay, sure, I'll leave my way.
It's funny you
mhm.
said that because when we were down in Wilmington, Jay, a couple of us were going to a concert. Our friend Alex, me, and another person, and Brooklyn. We were all meeting at a restaurant before the show, and Brooklyn was there first. And she does this often. She brings books into restaurants while she eats, and she is comfortable enough just being
Yeah.
there and reading. So does this kind of answer some of your questions? Like when you get attention for being in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, and you become so noted for that at an early impressionable age that you can still go to a restaurant and read a book and be like, yeah, I'm totally fine just being here by myself.
I think to answer your question, Jay, I think if I ever had that superpower, it's gone. Because to Hayes' point, I just read at bars now, and like I don't know, no one comes up to me. So I mean, I really like for someone. I really like that feeling. That'd be lovely to be like, sorry, I can't. I'm married. That'd be really nice. But no one tries. So I don't know if I'm like giving off a really sort of hard line no, or if it's just sort of if I need to do more facial exercises, to get back. It's been a while. It's been a long time. It's been a good 15 years now. It's been a while.
How did that come to be? Was that is the equivalent of getting like an acting break? Like you were already, you were modeling, and then this is like, it's like getting a big role.
It
right?
is. Especially like this was 2000 and I mean, it's so silly now to think about it, but I had just graduated high school and moved to New York, and I had been spending a lot of time. I had like spent my summer breaks, my Christmas breaks, my spring breaks all in New York. And one of my parents had gone with me. Their whole rule was like, you can't travel to the city, you can't work, you can go to a set until you're 18 years old. So at 18, I moved, and that summer, one of like the big castings I was going to, and we would like hit the ground running. I mean, Hayes, you probably know with Ali's experience, like 10, 12 castings a day, you're running around, and it's like just brutal. It's also ridiculous and silly. And I
show up with your book, like
Yeah.
you show up with a book of pictures, where they call it something like
it's your portfolio. Yeah. And they look at pictures and they take pictures of you, and sometimes they measure you, and sometimes they try clothes on you, and it's like this silly, crazy thing.
Fun,
and
though. Fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was
Sort of.
18 living in New York, and I was, I had grown up in North
Fun
Carolina.
if you've got the goods, not fun if you're not what they want.
True. I mean,
Could be.
yeah. And that's the thing is like, for me at that time, and it's different now, but like, at that time, the movement was like heavily, Brazilian and Eastern European. And so like the American models weren't really working a lot. It wasn't very in vogue to be American at that time, which is silly, but that's how sort of the trends worked then. And Sports Illustrated would have been a huge opportunity for me because, one, they're like not crazy about bodies like sort of high fashion is. And two, this is so minor, but it was so impactful at the time. They were one of the few, actually the only publication to publish your name with your picture. So they were making like household names out of their models, where no one else was giving any sort of credit to who the model actually was. And like, if you got the cover, you'd go on Letterman, and they were doing like online content. They were doing video content. They were doing profiles. So like, as a career sort of break, they were huge. And so I went to see MJ Day, who was the assistant editor-in-chief at Sports Illustrated. And I showed her my portfolio. We took pictures, and I was on the subway home, got lost, ended up in Queens somewhere. And I got a call from my agent that I booked Sports Illustrated. And so that was my first big break. 18. And they like, when no one else, I mean, I wasn't getting a ton of work. And when they booked me, all of a sudden, like the doors opened up and they, again, like supported I had like an online show because of them. Like they put me on talk shows. They know
Sure.
that if
they
they build like,
they made you a star. They kind of just,
they did,
they put you into the system.
they
But
did.
was that nerve wracking? Because they're different skill sets, right? Like modeling and then being able to hold your own in a talk show.
I loved it because I could talk.
Because you could,
I
right?
was able to say, people were asking me questions. I was able, when you're told just to shut up and not talk, especially at that time as an American who was very smiley. There was a model. I won't say her real name, or I won't say her stage name later. But her last name was Smiley, and the agency made her change her last name professionally because no one wanted, they wanted like moody. They didn't want like a happy, sunny disposition walking in the room. So to have someone like ask about where you're from or what you're interested in, like it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. So maybe it was a different skill set, but I don't know.
Did you
I thought
have
it was
creative input into like what you'd wear or how the pose, or you were there at the photographer, you were the muse?
awesome?
Did you feel as you went on, because you did multiple issues, right?
I
mean, it was
did,
a recurring.
Yeah, I did a few
You
issues.
felt more like I'm going to use the palm tree in this one. I'm going to lean.
Yeah,
You
I was
start
like, I'm
making
gonna, yeah, like I am gonna get on the surfboard, and I am gonna. I took whatever little power I could grasp, which was not much at the time. No, Sports Illustrated, to their credit, was really awesome, and they were one of the few at the time. They were like, eat a cheeseburger before we shoot. We don't want you like looking too skinny. What do you feel comfortable in? If you don't like that, you don't have to wear it. Do you like this thing, this location? If you don't like it, let's move it. Like they 100% wanted you to feel great. And I don't really know anyone else who was like that at the time. They were awesome.
Yeah, they've always. That's good to hear, because they just weren't, is subjectifying the right word? They weren't objectifying you in like a way. They had care for what they were doing.
Well, I think one of the things that people don't realize about the swimsuit issue itself is that the swimsuit issue had a different editor-in-chief than Sports Illustrated did. And they were very much intertwined, and I worked with a ton of people on the Sports Illustrated side, and still have relationships there. But the swimsuit issue had its own editor-in-chief, its own staff, and that was the biggest moneymaker of the year for the publication. And what people don't know is that from its inception, it had a female editor-in-chief. Like women were running. So women were casting women were choosing what you were wearing, women were picking the photographers, women were choosing the locations. So I think the reason why it worked so well is because it was done through the lens of a woman. So it was like sort of sexiness and health and all of that through the perspective of a bunch of women. And so yeah, they took such good care of the models, because they were, it felt very, it didn't feel like, were we wearing like nothing running around for a swimsuit issue? Yeah. So like, I think just by design, someone could say we were being objectified, but it never ever felt that way, because it was like all women just hanging out on an island together, taking cool pictures.
It's incredible.
I know.
Yeah, it was
it's not
great.
what I expected.
Yeah.
No, but even what it's doing now, I mean, I haven't seen it in a while, but I know that it's making radical choices in the last couple of years with the swimsuit issue. I mean, with even transgender women in the magazine, like,
Yeah. They're amazing.
It sounded like it started like almost a sexist concept, and it's actually, to your point,
It's quite
more
feminist.
it's more subversive than that. Like,
It's very,
To say the least. Yes.
it's quite, I mean, they're constant. I mean, like Martha Stewart being on the cover, like it's ageless. I mean, women
Martha
of all
Stewart
abilities.
was on the cover.
Yeah.
She was on a cover a couple of years ago.
I
Yeah.
I
Googled
could
that
write
recently.
some taglines. Was it like now we're cooking?
Ah, yeah, probably.
I
That
Googled
actually is probably exactly what it was.
I
Yeah.
Googled that last week, Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Why were you Googling that, Jay?
You've exhausted
Brooklyn,
the internet
my
that
Google
much.
history is not something we want to delve into.
What kind of path did you go down after searching for Martha Stewart in Sports Illustrated swimsuit?
I
Yeah, she was
just-
smoking. She looked hot.
It was right after Betty White, and
Yeah. I mean, I swear I'm sure they asked Betty. I'm sure they must have asked Betty at some point.
You know, and Coulter bikini. I'm like, okay, I don't know. See what's
Oh
going on.
wow, look at you. An equal opportunist. Yeah.
Did you feel then, Brooklyn, when you started taking acting roles and auditioning, that you had to, somehow combat that persona of being a model? I know that that's
Yeah.
something that's
Oh,
happened.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, still.
I got chops. I want to let these people know I got.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think even still, it's probably links back to the nerves we were talking about in the beginning. But I think to this day, it is something I feel self-conscious about for sure. To this day, it's like I think people think of me as like a model actor and not as just. I don't know that I'll ever be considered like a real actor, despite the fact that I haven't modeled. I mean, I haven't haven't had like a modeling agency in 13 years. I've been acting for longer, but even though I think now it's so different because you look at the sort of the young kids coming up, like the sort of like young, interesting actors, and they're all doing music and everyone's doing a million different things. It doesn't matter. You don't have to like choose a lane. I think I was a product of a time where you very much had to kind of like be siloed to be taken seriously,
I feel the same. I feel like people don't take me seriously as an actor
Because of your modeling career, Jay?
Because of my modeling career.
Your sexiness is so distracting.
Thank you.
It's just like,
Thank you.
I just can't
Thank
see
you.
past. It's so
Brooklyn,
hard.
I know you're joking about this, but I was.
I'm not.
I was in People's Sexiest Men Alive
I believe
issue.
that. I believe that.
So, but
I'm really not joking. I'm just. I'm. Go on. I'm being very serious.
Because the way we came up, my friends and I, is we wrote a movie. We cast ourselves in the middle of it. We made the movie and then took it to Sundance and sold it. And you're like, I've always felt like people are like, yeah, you just did that. Like, you're not a real actor. You never really got cast. You just forced your way into 9 movies in a row.
But Jay, I feel like you're known as like it's so funny. That's not my perception of you. My perception of you is like, you're a revered actor director who's really funny.
A multi-hyphenate.
And like now I feel like from the out, like truly just from the outside, like let's take the 30,000 foot view. I'd be like, oh, Jay's a director who's doing good work and like had this really cool thing that he did a long time ago that like was his breakout. But I view you as a director actor who's really funny.
I appreciate that, but in order for me to keep going, I need to invent false narratives about myself and fight back against them.
Sure. We want to be the underdog. Yeah. Welcome. Join our team.
You don't think I'm an actor?
Welcome.
You watch this thing.
That's how I feel. I mean, hey, Hayes and I, the conversations we had about acting, I can only imagine how I'd be mortified if people heard like how seriously we were talking about being actors.
You know that the sound guys are listening, right?
It's going to leak. Well, these days it's going to leak. And they're going to be like, these douchebags who...
They'd be like, these douchebags.
Jokes.
And I'm also the first one always to make fun of people who seriously talk about acting.
Yeah.
But then when you're trying to block a scene or figure something out, it's like, we got to speak this language. And you're like, okay. And then if someone was listening to it, you'd be like,
it'd be mortifying.
They're always listening.
I know.
I talked to Mike Rowland, who's on this show, Animal Control, that I do. And he was a new actor. And he was telling me all about last night and what he did and this party and this girl. And I was like, Mike, pretend I'm an undercover cop. You are being recorded. And I walked over to the sound guy. I'm like, just erase those last 5 minutes because that's just.
And did he? Did he erase them?
Well, he said,
keep him in his back
he goes,
pocket?
I listen to people say all sorts of things all day. And he goes, I just don't. It's just goes into it. Nothing's. No one will ever hear. I'll never, ever. It's sort of what happened with Trump and that on the bus with Billy Bush. Like, that's what happened. Like the mic was left
It's a hot mic.
because they were riding up to a location to get out and then they were going to do their thing. And
well, even with this, which I can't believe with everything in the world happening, we're going to talk about this, but even with this, it ends with us, Blake Lively, Baldoni lawsuit. They're leaking audio clips of them
should never be leaked.
talking on set. Like, isn't that illegal to record someone without them?
Well, no,
without
because
their knowledge?
they're rolling. I mean, they're
Yeah,
like
they're rolling.
releasing, they're rolling, and eh, by the way, just like the anatomy of a scene to watch an anatomy of a scene when it's not cut. Because I saw that clip, I was like, this is the most uncomfortable. Not because of the situation, just because watching people film a scene when you're not on set, when you're separated from it, it's not edited. It's weird as hell. It's
Yeah.
so awkward. It's
Yeah.
just so it's so awkward.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. So Daniel Craig, amazing. He's James Bond.
Of course.
And he's so cool and he's so serious. If he's getting out of a car and walking into a restaurant, that 15 seconds, the way he opens the door, uncrosses his leg, fixes his shirt collar, then, that is the coolest 15 seconds in the world. But if you look on either side of that, he's probably like farting and joking around.
His shirt's
and
untucked. He's like, "Fuck! I got to tuck my shirt in." It's just awkward. There's like someone coming and touching up lip balm. Like it's just so to watch it is so uncomfortable. It's so awkward. But yeah, but you'll give that like tuck that thing like you think about those things. You think about those things. It's awkward.
Brooklyn, we did 3 shows. At least 3 shows that we weren't there at the same time, but New Girl, Chuck, and Royal Pains.
Oh wow.
All
Yeah.
3.
Yeah. Which one was your favorite?
Look, New Girl was so special because all those actors were like high-end comedians who could also act.
Yeah.
And so the rhythm that was created on that show was very, very high-end comedy. And Zoe is like could memorize a page at a time and just boom, nail it. Like that to me, you go, wow, that's just impressive. Chuck was kind of cool because it had that sort of spy, but Zach Levi is a very, very talented guy from a performance perspective, and he can do incredible imitations. He can sing, he can dance. He's like one of those guys. And then Royal Pains was, it was awesome. I mean, we were out in like deep in the Hamptons, off Montauk, shooting like stuff about medical stuff that none of us understood. But it was awesome. I mean, I shot a lot of all 3 of those shows, and I loved it all. If I had to pick my favorite, it'd probably be New Girl.
New Girl, yeah.
Just because I'm like, I'm a comedian. I'm among comics, and I love being with comics.
And they could riff a lot on that show too, right? It felt like it was loose.
Well, it was interesting because that show the head writer had a staff that would create the script, and then she would create 12 alts. So 12 other jokes that could fit in this slot. So you'd end up with this like 40-page alt packet. And the first couple of years, the actors would do all the alts. And by the 3rd year, Zoe would be like, I'm only doing 2 alts. So, show me.
Choose wisely.
Show me your 10 favorites and I'll pick 2. I'll do those 2. That's it. And you're like, okay.
When I did that show and I did that game they do, the New American, Bad American, they do some drinking game on within the show.
In the show.
And I got to do an episode where we did that.
Oh,
and
fun.
The New Girl fan base is, first of all, I was a fan of the show. I didn't watch like every episode, but I loved the show. But the
like our
fan
podcast.
base, like your podcast. But I'm not gonna miss one, especially this one. The fan base of the show was so, they wanted to know all about the game and like, were there real rules and how do we play it? And no, they're like, everyone was throwing shit against the wall and seeing what stuck. It was so much fun, and I love that cast. I just had a great time on the show. I thought it was, it felt loose and easy, and I also came in later, so there was such a comfort that existed on that set. Everyone was so relaxed. It felt like summer camp.
Can I bring up, this is another side of you, Brooklyn, that wouldn't have struck an individual if they only knew your persona. But you're incredibly active in your own community. And while we were working in North Carolina, the Asheville hurricane hit, there were 2 hurricanes that hit while we were there.
Yeah, Hurricane Helene was a doozy.
One kind of hit Wilmington.
Yeah.
And I felt it, and I hadn't been in a hurricane before. And I was like, it was buckets and buckets of water for like 2 minutes and then nothing. and then buckets and like if you were driving, you almost had to stop your car because it felt like there were 4 hoses on your windshield.
Were you driving in the hurricane haze?
I did get caught driving a couple times because I didn't know. You know, I was like, everyone kind of, it happens so regularly in North Carolina. They're like, yeah, you can still go out. I was like going to a movie or something at night. But the one that hit Asheville, the really devastating one, because what is Asheville's like 3 hours?
Yeah, 3 hours
east?
from Charlotte.
West, right?
West,
It's west. It's about 3 hours sort of northwest from
And that
Charlotte,
doesn't
where I
get
am.
hurricanes typically or something? Is that
No, no. I mean, you're in the
thing
mountains.
ducked inland and then sat.
Yeah.
It sat over Asheville and flooded it. And I think the river rose something like 45
That's
feet
right.
in 17 minutes. Something.
That's right.
And that one hit when we were down there.
Yeah, it's
And
bad.
That was radical. And then following you on social media, Brooklyn, I saw how like you kind of became a North Star for where people should go for help and what to do. And here's where the aid is. And
Well, it was helpful. I mean, it's like what's happening in California right now, where some of these really big organizations have a harder time mobilizing, but you have these sort of. I mean, we were with Helene specifically. My grandparents live in Burnsville, which was hit very hard. Their house was fine, thank goodness, but their community was hit very hard. So the fire department there became the headquarters for everyone to come get food and to come get clothing and to come get hand warmers because there was a cold snap a few weeks after, and so. It was really easy for us to be super efficient and effective with like, bring all these donations here. We'll bring them up to the mountains. We'll get someone to bring up to the mountains. I remember in Wilmington, because Charlotte, it was amazing to see like how many local people just rallied around Western North Carolina. And in Charlotte, the day after, there were no buckets, there were no generators, there were no batteries, there were no flashlights. Everything was sold out because people were hoarding them just to take them up to the mountains. And so I had my big Jeep. I have this Grand Cherokee that I have, and I was in Wilmington, and I went to the Home Depot in Wilmington and started buying like buckets and flashlights and batteries and all the things because my uncle and my dad were driving them up to Burnsville. And when I was in there were so many carts, so many people with the flatbed carts getting the same supplies. And they're like, you going to Western North Carolina? You going to Western North Carolina? Let me help you load your car. Let me help you. It was such a cool, in those times, like we're seeing in LA, you see the best of people and you see the worst of people. And I was able, because I knew people there, I was able to just, help share where people could support. But it's still really rough. I don't know when y'all are airing this, but my husband's actually playing a tennis event up in Asheville this weekend that benefits Habitat for Humanity Asheville, so they can get back to building houses for people. But
are they able to?
rough.
Is the ground like ready to be built? Have
Yeah.
they cleared out? It has.
They have.
Wow,
Yep.
that's kind of
Yep.
quick. It was just a
It's
couple
just
months.
expensive. It's I think now they're saying it's like $68 billion is what it's going to cost the state. And Biden committed to have federal funding cover like 90% of it. And I guess normally after these disasters, federal funding comes in at 75%. And obviously Trump was there last week and is saying that they're going to provide a lot of support. So hopefully North Carolinians see more support in the next, and not only North Carolinians, but a lot of people in Tennessee were affected as badly as they were in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But all that to say, yeah, we were down there. I mean, we were in Wilmington, and when that was going on, and that was a
Well, yeah, because
was
we
a
saw
weird
people
week.
coming through. People were fleeing Asheville and coming into Wilmington. So you'd be at a restaurant or a bar. You would be reading a book. I would be looking for refugees, and you would feel like,
such
where
a
are you
good
guys?
person.
Look, where are you guys? Like you felt it. Like you
Yeah.
felt people that had been traumatized coming to a different community. It was.
I have to
You're right.
plug in for 1 second, so keep chatting. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Live
Perfect.
Vegas.
I felt that recently because essentially it was like my old neighborhood in Los Angeles that
Are your people
that burned
okay?
down.
Your own
Yeah,
neighborhood.
the craziest thing about I think what happened in LA is the ratio between destruction and loss of life. I don't know if certainly in my lifetime, but if there's ever been a bigger disparity between how much stuff is totally ruined and devastated and so little people actually got hurt.
Which is great. Which if
That's-
there's ever ratio
because
we want to have.
it looks like it was flattened by a bomb or
Right.
a fire that happened immediately and people couldn't escape. But it was a fleeing and then it was all
Yeah.
scorched. So it was nuts. I did call my old neighbors right afterwards because I don't necessarily believe the stuff that, and I'm not being conspiratorial here, but I don't take the news feeds, the stuff that's being fed to you. It's just too filtered, but I love speaking to people, especially people who are close to situations that you're following. And so when I would talk to my neighbors, I would be like, Stacy, what was your story? And she's like, we had 10 minutes and it was one of those things and we grabbed everything. And my husband was out of town. Now I'm trying to get back into the neighborhood to get more stuff and it's quarantined or
You can't.
blocked off.
Yeah,
and
you
it was
can't.
right at the southern edge of the Palisades fire. And we can't get back in, but there's people, looters going through. Like, I was like, really? Like, I haven't heard that. I hadn't heard it at that time that was happening. This is like at the day it was happening is when people started going in. So that's how I get my news, just from
Your neighbors.
like, talking to people and like the Asheville people that we were talking to or in Wilmington. What was that like? How quickly did it come through? And I get that hit like, oh yeah, the houses in Asheville, there was some threshold of, I don't know, let's say like 300 feet or 200 feet, some elevation where everything above it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And
anything along
below
the
it was
rivers. The Swannanoa River, just
devastated.
Devastating. Yeah. Well, and the thing that was so interesting about that is just when you look at, not that we should compare and contrast because we shouldn't, but what was so helpful, I think, with LA, and granted, I had a friend actually who was just in North Carolina who like left LA because she was housing displaced people and she had 3 alerts to evacuate and she was not in an evacuation zone. So the communication was really disjointed in LA, but there was communication. And I think the hard part about North Carolina is there was no, power was out, cell towers were down, there was no way to communicate. So for a week, for 5 days, it was like, what's going on? How much damage is there? How can people help? It's scary to see how quickly everything can just collapse.
Yeah, it
because
goes
there's
from
no
like modern society to the Stone Ages.
That's right.
Jay, you told a really funny story. Will you tell Brooklyn the story about, because I was checking on you the week of the fires because you were coming up here to do the show. And I was checking on the health and wellness of your family, of course. But then I was thinking, oh no, is Jay going to be able to come up and do this show? And it was benefit. And he's like, yeah, I'll be there. I'll definitely. And I was like, well, what's going on? And you told the story about when Susan had asked you would she ask you to like go to the store or something?
Yeah, my wife was like, because there was, we live near sort of the Hollywood Bowl. I can see it from my front yard. Sorry, not the bowl, but the Hollywood sign, which is also near the bowl. So, like there was a fire about 1.5 miles away, but this hadn't quite happened yet. But we were watching the Palisades on television burn, which was quite traumatic because you're like, the winds are 100 miles an hour and you're like, is it like you would have to burn all through Brentwood, jump the 405, burn Beverly Hills, burn Laurel. It would have to get through a lot to get to us, but you're still you're like, oh my God, we're, what should we pack all this? What? So my wife's like, you better go to the grocery store and get some supplies. I'll text you a list. So I'm like, okay, great. So I go over to Ralph's and I'm on the list versus red wine, and then white wine, and then Stella. She likes Stella.
Yeah,
so that's the first drink.
Yeah, important.
And she's like, a chicken soup. Okay, whatever. So we get all these things. And I'm like, I buy them all. And there's this last thing on the list. And I'm like, I'm looking around for this last thing on the list. And sometimes they keep it outside. So I'm looking for that. I don't see it. So I just buy the stuff. And I'm leaving the store and she calls me up. She's like, did you get the list? I'm like, yeah. I got it. Yeah, everything but the last thing. She's like, why didn't you get the last thing? And I'm like, well, I don't know. They didn't have it outside. And she goes, yeah, you have to ask somebody. She goes, why don't you use your brain and ask somebody and you'll get the thing because we're going to need it. And
she's right. You could have used your brain and asked somebody.
Okay. I'll use my brain and ask somebody. So
Yep.
I walk back in. There's a big line of people buying all these supplies because they're freaking out. And I'm like, excuse me, you guys have firewood? And the woman looks at me. She goes, "Are you kidding?" And I'm like, I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know. And I just walk out, right? And I get home, and I'm like, "What do you do? What firewood?" And she goes, "Well, what if the power goes out and we have no way to heat the house?" And I'm like, "That's a good point."
But
But,
wait. How are you going to heat a house? Do you have a wood burning fireplace?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I know
we
there are
do.
very few of those left. And
Well,
okay, got it.
gas.
Okay.
It's gas wood burning. I don't know what
I know
it
what
is.
you mean. There's a gas
You know,
starter and you put
yeah.
the wood. Okay.
But I wonder if
Okay.
someone in line like, there's that comedian
I
asking
know.
for firewood while the
I
city's
know.
burning down.
Golly, that's
It
hard.
was,
Ooh.
and then you know, and then
That's
there is
tough
a
spot.
fire. Eventually, it's about a mile and a half away, and they're getting ready to evacuate us. But it's the next day. The winds are not. They're not going at all, and basically they evacuate us. So I'm like going to my kids like, pack a bag. We gotta go. It wasn't. I don't know. You're worried. You're thinking the whole
Yeah, of
place is
course.
going to go down, mile and a half away. And so we're getting ready to leave, and we have 2 cars packed full of stuff, and we live behind gates here, bro. And so we open the first gate.
Oh, there are multiple. Okay.
There's a gate on either end.
Okay.
There's a
Yeah,
gate
you've got
on
multiple
either
gates.
end.
Okay.
I walk across my helicopter pad to the third gate. And I start yelling at my butler. When are they putting these fires out?
There's a station wagon waiting at that gate, right? And we're driving by and we're pulling down the hill, and my wife calls me. She goes, "You go back to the house. Those guys are looters." And I'm like, "Okay." And I live for these moments where I can be a hero in my life. So I'm like, I'm gonna just go kick these guys.
Did you have a plan? Did you have like,
no?
I'm going to use my
no.
hands.
But I
I've got
pull
a
around,
stick. Okay.
and I come back
You're
into the
scream.
thing, and I basically just drive behind them, right? And they're driving around, they're looking for a spot. I'm just driving behind them, and they turn around, they screech out of there. So now my wife's like, "Just stay with the house."
Oh no.
And I'm going to
that's
go to the
hard.
evacuation to my friend's house. And I'm like, okay. So
I think Susan had a plan. She's like, she's got the
Stay
firewood lit. She's like, stay in the house.
She's like, if the mob at the store doesn't kill him,
right.
Yeah.
something else is going to
Honey, I just got a
the
credit card
looters are
alert that
going
you
to
bought
get
a
him.
ticket to
Yeah.
Cabo. Why are you?
So I'm standing in the driveway, like looking tough, and these helicopters, because we live right next to the Hollywood Reservoir, are picking up water and flying right over the house. And I'm like, "You got them, guys!" And they put the fire out, and I go to her friend's house where she's evacuating, which is basically just drank wine and ate pizza for 3 hours. And they put the fire out. We turned around and came back, and these guys. After we're coming to the house unpacking, our security car.
What'd the security detail tell you?
He comes pulling up the street, and I'm like, "Oh, is the evacuation over?" He goes, "No, but I'm here for you." I'm like, "Okay, great." And that same car with the station wagon is now outside the gate again, and they see the car, and I'm inside unpacking stuff. And my wife is listening, and she's in the driveway unpacking. And one of the guys gets out of the car, and he goes, Owen, that's a real police car. Get the fuck out of here, right? And my wife just sort of is hiding behind the car. She goes, "Yeah, it's a real police car." And the dude goes, "What'd you say, N-word?" Right? And then I come out, and I'm like, "What happened?" She goes, "This guy just called me the N-word." I'm like, "Oh, was it?" I'm like, "Who?" He goes, "The looters." I'm like, "What?" I said, "Were they black guys?" He goes, "Oh, no, they were white guys. They were white guys. I'm white. The security guy, we were all white." And I'm like, "Guys, you're favorite people." I don't even know.
What is happening in your neighborhood, Jay? Okay, question. What can I mean, maybe this is too personal, but what did you take? like when you thought I might be leaving and we've got 10 minutes, like what do you grab?
The
What do you
first
do?
thing I
What
did
do
is I
you-
took all my
Ecstasy.
favorite T-shirts,
all the wine,
all my favorite T-shirts,
all the drugs. Yeah.
I did go through
You
my
got your favorite t-shirts.
yes, because
Okay.
those
Your
are hard to
T-shirts.
replace.
Wow.
I did go through my drug box, and like
Brought the essentials.
because I made Beer Fest, people feel like they need to hand me a lot of weed. It doesn't seem to link up, but they do. And so I took some, not all of it. I'm like, I can always get more. But I really, mostly just like pictures. And I'll honestly, I walked through my office and my closet and I'm like, I don't need any of this shit. And as a result, when I got back, I took half of my clothes and just donated it.
Wow.
Because
What
I
a good
read a book by
perspective
Marie
shift.
Kondo called
Ah,
Tidying Up. You read
Sure,
that
sure.
book?
I
So take-
refuse to read that book. I don't subscribe to that, but I respect it.
We basically take all your stuff out of your office, put it in a pile, and only the stuff that
you sort
sparks
it and
joy
sparks joy. Yeah, yeah.
brings. Yeah. You can
Well,
roll your eyes at it,
Brooklyn, I feel like
but
that would
you know.
be right up your alley, a book like that. You're not.
I'm not going to show you the current state of this office, but everything in my life sparks joy. So
Uh-huh.
I'm not
Hey.
a hoarder, but like give me 20 years and people might call me one, I
Brooke-
don't want to edit.
Did Taze tell you about this thing called Vouch Vault? This
No.
Okay. Well, you're gonna have a few minutes to prepare. So
Oh dear.
I started an app called Vouch Vault.
Oh, I looked it up today.
And it's meant to be all the things you love, all the every book you've read that you liked, every movie, TV.
Well, Brooklyn's got so much stuff. She can't throw any of it away.
I
Look
have-
at her office.
I've got books. I've got
Like restaurants. If you love a restaurant, you just
fabrics.
put it in there. And so, for example, if I were in, I don't know, North Carolina, I'd be like, oh, I need a restaurant. I'd look you up, and you'd have whatever restaurants you went to, right? Like, okay, great. So I already know Brooklyn, and I know that she has good taste. So then you go to. So at the end of this podcast, we vouch for one thing, anything. So you can vouch for a restaurant, a book, a movie, whatever television show you're watching, anything.
Okay.
And I will go first. Here, hold it.
This is an exercise in what's top of mind. Like this isn't really what's most meaningful to you, or like the thing you can vouch for. This is just an exercise in what's top of mind, right?
Anything.
Okay.
So I read this book. It's called Shantaram.
Okay.
Okay.
What is this? 2005? You're suggesting this book now?
I haven't read this book.
Okay. So Shantaram.
Am I that
Because-
late? Am I
Because
20
I'm
years late?
because I'm Indian, people whenever they
No, you're
read
not.
an Indian book, they go, "Hey Jay, have you read that Indian book?" And I'm like, "Hey man,
Yeah.
I have."
No.
Yeah. So I finally resisted reading Shantaram mostly because it was like 934 pages. But it's a book about this Australian guy who was like convicted of drug crimes in Australia, heroin. He did a little bit of robbery and whatever. He got in trouble, put in prison in Australia for 20 years, and he escapes and he goes to India and he hides in India. And his alias is that he's from New Zealand, not Australia. And there he ends up kind of making amends in a way, sort of. He lives in this slum in New Delhi, and he kind of like becomes the doctor, sort of, even though he's not really a doctor. He's sort of first aid. And then he ends up joining the Indian mob, and it's a fantastic, incredible story. And that's largely true. But it's a novel. And it just gives you this like expat's view of India that I absolutely love. So
Did he go down? Did he, or should you not share that? Is that the sort
well,
of-
I'm
maybe don't share it if it's gonna.
Yeah, I was on the
be a
New York
spoiler.
City subway reading it, and 3 people came up to me and talked to me about the book, and I was on page 900. I had like 30 to go, and I was stop, because they wanted to tell me to. So
Got it. Okay.
it's
Don't
it's
share.
an excellent book, Shantaram. I know 934 pages is not for everybody, but it's
Great.
worth it. It's
I wrote it
a
down.
page.
My wife loves that book. She's talked to me about it so much over the years and has just insisted that I've read it. And I'm wondering if I read it because you've suggested it and she sees me with it. Where it came up.
Don't love that. Don't
Yeah,
love
like,
that.
Wait, what? Well, Jay said it was a great book.
I've
I've
been telling you to
about
read
this
it for
book
20 years. But Jay said, oh.
They made a movie out of that book, didn't they?
Apparently, it's like a streaming on Apple TV.
Yes, it was. It was streaming. But that feels like one you have to.
I wouldn't
read.
stream it until you've read it. It's
It's such a thick tome, 900
is.
pages.
That is a lot.
It's about crime and redemption. And at one point, he goes to Afghanistan and helps his crime boss running guns to the Mujahideen rebels. It's fantastic.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm going to
do
read it.
Yeah.
I need something.
So I was thinking of what I was going to vouch for. The movies that get critical acclaim aren't necessarily my favorite movies to watch. The last couple of years, this has been the case. Got kids. It's just hard to sit down and really immerse yourself in this stuff sometimes. Or you're looking at your phone. There's always something to be distracted. But every now and then, there's a movie you got to pay attention to if you want to follow. And I watched Conclave. The movie about the selection of the Pope. It was.
You got to see
felt
that.
like a dry. It felt like despite the fact that I was an altar boy and raised Chicago Catholic in the
Did not know
Jesuit
that.
community, I was like, I don't know. Is this going to feel like homework? Like the Two Popes, some of those shows. But this movie is a really, really great movie. It's almost a thriller. You have to pay attention to all the words that are being said because it's political and people are angling for positions. It's like it's almost like it's like a political show almost in this. But I thought it was really, really, really well done. It's beautiful. The guy Edward Berger, I think is his name. He's the director. He did All Quiet on the Western Front. That came out 2 years ago. It was a German film. It's awesome.
How does it make you feel about your Catholicism? Are you still Catholic?
I am still Catholic. Catholicism is something that I've had and then I've gone away from. But now that I'm raising children, I like to take them to give them some kind of ritual. So I take them to mass every couple months and we check the boxes on the major rites of passage in it. And it's a nice tradition. My grandmother, who's turning 100 this year, is deeply Catholic, Irish Catholic. So I like continuing that lineage. And one of my favorite things in the world is an empty Catholic church, to walk in there and light a candle and just sit down and clear the dome, meditate, humble yourself. I like that. So to answer your question, the movie Conclave is really political about all the hierarchy and that part of the church, which I'm not necessarily fully knowledgeable about or reverent to or involved in. But when you think about it over the years, you think of so much history. Like starting with the Roman Empire and the Crusades and just all the stuff that has come through the church is really interested. But in my life, it's probably bifurcated from any type of spiritual practice I have. But yeah, it's all that. So I love the movie. The performances are great. It's not it's non-denominational. It's good storytelling. It's just like a cool, interesting movie is how I would describe it.
I'm going to watch it.
Me too. I hear also that it's absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful. Every scene is beautiful. I'm looking at my pile of books over there.
My wife's a Catholic and she told me to watch it, but I was like, I'm not sure. But now that Hayes told me,
great.
I'm like,
wow.
Also, the Vatican.
I'm
what
mad.
A radical
I'm mad
place.
at the two of you. I'm just hearing this. I'm getting my neck's getting hot. I'm getting angry thinking about how this would go down in my house. Oh my goodness. But I hear it's beautiful. I just went to my first, sorry to derail this slightly. I just went to my first, a friend of mine, her dad passed away this year. And I went to my first, I'd never been to mass. And I don't know if it's the same mass for I don't even know if you call it a funeral, like a funeral service as it is for regular mass. But I thought the routine of it was so beautiful. All these he's something in the church that's like honorable. I don't remember what the name was, but all these people came in and they were all like in these beautiful robes and everyone knew when to sit and stand and say words. And I thought like it felt meditative. And I just thought it was such a beautiful routine practice.
Yeah, I like a
It was
little
really interesting.
gravitas in the practice. Like I like sitting in the woods around a lake and, maybe just meditating with the kids or doing something like that as a spiritual practice. It's as worthy as anything else. But every now and then I like feeling the hammer drop, like a giant organ or people in robes or
There were
incense
cloaks. It was like
marble
Hogwarts,
pillars,
you know?
flying
Yeah.
buttresses where you're like, how the hell did they build this in the 1500s?
Yeah,
Like,
it was intimidating.
it instills a little bit more awe and wonder into you. And that's the design. And actually in this movie, I was looking at some of the Michelangelo paintings, like in the Sistine Chapel, or all the artwork. And you're like, gosh, so much art came out of this. Like,
Yeah.
where did this all come from? Like,
yeah. That's a whole nother podcast about that. Okay, my vouch. I feel like I should say book because no. Here's what my vouch is. Just because you mentioned restaurant and we're talking about Wilmington, and Hayes and I were just in Wilmington, filming a show for a few months. There is a restaurant down there, Hayes. I don't know if you ever went. I told you about it, called Olivero in Wilmington. It's new, and I'm vouching for them because they just got their first James Beard nomination. They
Wow.
just announced it 3 days ago. And it's very cool to see a small town like Wilmington get recognition like that. And this restaurant, like that's one of the restaurants I would walk to. I had an Airbnb around the corner. I would walk there. I'd bring a book. I'd sit at the bar. I had the most beautiful dinners, great conversation with people working there. And it just got a James Beard nomination this week. So I'm vouching for Olivero in Wilmington.
What kind of food is it?
It's kind of like farm to table with meets Italian.
Yeah.
But it feels fresh and local and new, and the menu changed every night. And the bartender was like super passionate about the drink she was making, and there was just something different always. It was just it had a really good energy, and I love the place. And I saw them on the list.
Doesn't that feel good when you get hip to something on your own, and then it gets recognition, and you're like, I knew
take
it.
pride in that actually. Like
That's right.
that's a practice of mine. Is like, how can we? What's the next thing? Who's the next chef?
Yeah, you're like
how can we
listening to
support?
a singer-songwriter or a band, and you're the first one. You don't know how you started listening to them, but then all of a sudden the whole world is listening to them, and you're like,
feels good. Yeah,
I was on that one.
Especially when it's like a real like small town story. You know, it's like someone who came from somewhere interesting or a place like a Wilmington. It was. I like that. I like that feeling too. So that's my vouch.
It was perfect, Brooklyn.
Thanks.
Did great.
Thanks.
Well, that was super fun. This whole thing was super fun. I'm, all my nerves were for naught. I mean, we just riffed, we rolled, we got to know you. I had more Sports Illustrated questions, but then we started talking about the hurricane. I'm like, I don't know how to go back to that.
We really took it down. Then the wow.
Well, you did have like, would you wear a swimsuit in a hurricane?
I had that. I thought about that. Like, yeah, but then
really
I was
merging.
like, come on, let's.
Part two. We can just have all Sports Illustrated questions.
But thank you for coming on. That was
thank y'all for having me.
Incredible.
Thanks, Brooklyn. That was
Thank
so
you
fun.
both.
Great to see you.
Good to see you. Nice to meet you, Jay.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Thanks,
Bye now.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Mustache Tales.